All right, welcome back to another episode. We are so excited today to talk about honoring our kids. And this is really near and dear to our hearts because, first of all, we love kids and we want more kids to just love being in that space of being allowed to be kids. And we have our amazing nurtured parenting through brain reorganization program going on with Dr. Greg Kirschenbaum. So it's really like a topic we've been talking heavily about. And we've got our
True.
WhatsApp groups going off and parents asking questions. And our next module, parents don't know this yet, 100%. Well, I guess they do. We're bringing kids on board. And so Paloma and I really want to make sure that families see honoring from our perspective. And we want to share that in today's podcast. So we're going to bring in lots of information,
Yes.
studies and all sorts of different fun things. And essentially our take, as always, on how to honor your kids so that way you're living your best lives. And, we just,
Yes.
yeah. So let's get the conversation started, Paloma.
Well, I feel like the conversation started because we were thinking about we were putting some stuff into the program and how are we going to help parents understand how to motivate their kids?
Yeah.
And that if you're a parent or if you're a teacher, or if you've worked with kids, you know that question. You've asked yourself that probably many, many times. And motivating kids, like motivating adults, is very complex, right? Because there's so much going on. And so we found a few studies and this really interesting article about how traditional motivation systems don't really work.
Right.
And that's why we're always seeking more. That's why we're always looking for something else, right? And so for example, I think something that we can just get straight into it, baby girl. Like parents and teachers, we always want to find a way to give the kids something else in exchange for doing the thing that we want them to do, right?
Yeah.
That's such a
Compliance. Yeah.
common thing.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
adults, like a lot of you know, influencers that talk about motivating yourself to work out and lose weight and improve your habits and stuff. They always say that kind of stuff, right? Like, what are you motivating yourself with? And so the ultimate point of this is that the motivation has to be intrinsic. It has to come from within, that it has to be natural, right? And so when we're putting so many shiny objects right around the kid or the person who we're going to talk about kids mostly right
Yeah.
now, but we we're giving so much more value to the thing that they're getting, not the
Right.
thing that they're doing, right? So it's like clean your room. And if after you clean your room 5 days in a row, you get to watch a movie or you get, a video game or whatever it is. And so the kid's not cleaning their room to clean their room to build a new habit because something that's good for their brain and for their mind and for their
Mhm.
cleanliness and for whatever they're doing because they just want the toy. And
Right.
so you just completely it's like you strip meaning from the things that you're actually wanting them to do, and we
Yes.
start to put the value only on the other things, right? On the things that they're getting from it.
100%. And I am guilty of this, just like any
Everybody
parent who
is.
has ever walked the earth is guilty of this because we're human and we hit our point of I'm tired and I know I need to get this done and I need your
Absolutely.
compliance and I need you to just do it. And
Yeah.
I will attach that shiny, fun thing onto a lot of things. But the difference is of what we're working to accomplish, at least in my home, is really helping my kids understand the why. And I think when you can help them understand why do we want a clean room? Why do we want to brush our teeth every day? Why do we have to do certain things like practice reading? Then they start understanding the process
Yes.
and sometimes motivators come in then and can be helpful, right? Because we all
Yes.
do need, right, dopamine, that motivating hormone to keep us going and keep wanting more, to get a little refreshment, right? And so for the space that I come from is really talking to my kids almost incessantly about the process of everything of why do we do this? And when I have clarity in it, then they have clarity in it.
Yep.
And it's not just because I said so. And I think if we fall, and this is not to shame any parents, our goal here is to help you have more tools, more resources to just see things differently
Yeah.
and
And to
and
find that
gr-
balance.
and to find the balance and to grow your relationship with your kid. Because if you can remember back, why did you become a parent in the first place? Why did you become a teacher in the first place? What did you really want to do? You wanted to enrich your lives. You wanted to grow connection and you wanted to just find more meaning. But if we get ourselves so caught up in the mundane and having to do these little tasks and then they turn into meltdowns and it's just like,
Yes.
I hate this. Why did I make this choice? Right.
Yeah.
So, our goal here is to help you reframe this process and to help you learn how to motivate your kids from a very intrinsic space so they want to do what we're asking them to do.
Yeah, and we're
And
honoring that
yeah,
effort, right? We're
honoring
honoring.
it.
And that's really what the whole point of this podcast is, right? Is like honoring, not getting them to do things,
Right.
not checking it off your list or
Mhm.
their list or getting out the door faster. Of course, those things are important. And those things come when you start to honor their efforts and honor the wonderful things that they do because kids are amazing. And so it's about catching them being good and showing them what that means, right? Like, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying catching them being good, whatever good means for you, right? Whatever good
Right.
is like you're trying to accomplish, and under like showing them what that looks like and what it looks like in you and what they could look like in them, right? So I think, for example, one thing is like understanding. I mean, you know your kids better than anybody, and you know your students. If you're connected to your students, you know them really well. You know what they like, what they don't, what the personalities are, and
Mhm.
understanding, for example, what needs are they trying to get met when they
Mhm.
are avoiding something, when they're putting it off, when they're not getting it, or like when they're, we put these labels on kids. It's like, oh, he doesn't pay attention, he's lazy, he's this and that. When really, I mean, kids are just so transparent. That's the cool thing about kids. That's why we love them. They're so genuine, right? They're always going to show you what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's just about digging a little bit, right? So, like, for example, yesterday on Friday, I had this thing here in Mexico's. Yesterday was Dia del Niño, Kids Day, like National Kids Day.
Mhm.
And so on Friday, I had like a little like bazaar thingy, and I did like some movement breaks with the kids. It was super fun and silly. Then there was one kid who was just not into it. He was like, "Oh, this is so boring. This is for babies, like for all the activities, right?" They were reading a book, they were coloring some stuff. I will say maybe it wasn't the most exciting thing he'd ever done in his life, but and I noticed, and he was just like talking to his mom, like, this is for babies. I don't like this, blah, blah. And she was struggling so much because she had another kid with her. And so I was like, okay, what is this kid? I could tell he was really like smart and like, cause he was saying some things that he was like talking about this book that he was reading. And I was like, okay, you're young to be reading that, but okay. And so I was like, okay, he wants to feel seen. He wants to
Mhm.
feel valued. He wants to feel like he has a place in this group of like 25 kids that he's never seen before, right? And the
Mhm.
other ones are just like finding their own place. He can't find his place yet. So I said, "Hey, I really need some help. Are you available?" And he was like, "Yeah, 100%, right?"
Mhm.
And so I have these like little foam thingies for the sessions that I'm doing for when they're crawling, right? They're like the typical little like preschool like
Yeah.
squares that it's like
Yeah.
different colors and they have like
Yeah.
those thingies. And I was like, I really need you to count these, tell me what color it is and what shapes are in there, and like kind of like help me categorize them. He was 7. It was the best thing in his life. Like he was literally so on it. He was like, okay, sure, I'm going to set up over here. And he set up a little
Perfect.
station and he had a purpose and
Mhm.
he was seen. I realized I was the person who was guiding some of the movements and doing these things. And I wasn't really seeing him. I was seeing a group of kids, right? And I was like, okay, that was me. Like I had to look at him and say, okay, he needs a different kind of attention. And
Yeah.
that's true. Like some kids are fine with getting the group attention. Some people in general, like depends on your personality, depends on your brain. He needed to feel like he had a purpose that day and that like that I could tell, or that the people who were running the program could tell that he like had value, right? And meaning
Right.
to his life. And so it was so cute. He like got it and he was like wrote it down on this paper, like all over the place with his like, I mean, he was 7, right? Like
Yeah.
he was literally, and he couldn't stop talking about it. He was telling his
Yeah.
mom, yeah, and I did this, my project. And then his dad came to pick him up and he was like, yeah, my project and this and that. And like, it was the cutest thing ever, right? And so
And yeah.
why is it cute? Because you're giving the kid space to be himself. And
Yeah.
so now he's not disrupting. Now he's not melting on his mom. Now he's not saying this is so boring and blah, blah, blah. He's like, cool. And then he went back and he participated in all the rest of the activities for the
Yeah.
like the other 2 hours.
I love that.
Yeah.
You hit something so critical, and I think this is where when we're looking at motivation and we're looking at how do I get myself to do certain things that I know I need, but why am I not doing it? Right? There's so many different angles and nuances to this whole thing, but ultimately it boils down to what need is getting met, right? So when we look at
Always.
the parent, what need are you getting met by asking your children to do certain things? And
Mhm.
what is your why? Okay, being really clear on that. And then asking, like, what does your kids need? Right. And so
Mhm.
helping them understand their needs. And so this is where you have those conversations. And this is what we were just talking about before the podcast was how so many of us avoid looking at the emotional need to be met. And we're so afraid to talk about it that we
Yes.
avoid it. And then we're all just sitting here with like our shoulders shrugged up, like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And a kid with a disorganized brain, just like a parent, if they don't have certainty from their leader, their parent, their caregiver, they're out of there. They're like, you are not capable of leading me to where I need to go. And they feel that, right?
Exactly.
And
And
so
that's a
then
survival mechanism.
it
If
is because
you can't trust
100%.
the person, your leader,
Right.
you're gonna leave the
You're
pack.
out.
You're
You're
like,
going to
"Peace
leave the
out. I gotta
pack.
figure this out on
Yeah.
my own," right?
And that's very dangerous and a very
Ex
survival situation to leave the pack. But if
Yes.
it's so strong, right? That's where like we see people like kids. I did this too. I threatened to run away from home when I wasn't happy with certain
Right.
things. And then you like get to the end of the driveway, you're like, that was a real bad choice.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't really
not
wanna
sure
do
how to handle this world. And
I'm literally 4 years
so
old.
you
Yeah.
immediately go back into like, okay, maybe I'll rationalize and reason with this person.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's because you felt like they weren't meeting your need, right?
Yes.
And I my kids just said this to me the other day. It was last week, and I was at my point. I was like, okay, I'm having my human moment. I tell this to my kids all the time. I'm being a human. I'm tired. I've got a lot going on in my mind right now. I just really need some support from you guys just to do what you need to do. I asked you to do this, this, and this. And then my daughter, who's 5, turns around. She goes, but you're the adult. We're not supposed to take care of you. I said, very good point. I'm not asking you to take care of me. I'm asking take care of yourself, which would in turn help me.
Yeah.
And so she's like, huh, okay. And, so she just has these really deep thoughts of like, wait, what's the hierarchy here? But
Yes.
ultimately, she's like, you're supposed to help me with my needs. And I'm like, right. But my job as a parent is to help you become independent, not
Mhm.
dependent on me and have this codependency stuff that we're all still working through
Yeah.
that we talked about in a couple episodes back. But like becoming independent. So when you go out into this world, you can manage and handle whatever comes your way. And, you're still going to
Exactly.
need support. You're not done, but you at least have the idea of like, okay, I can feel my emotions. When my mom asked me to do this, I initially want to feel angry about it because, and then we talk about it, or I feel
Exactly.
frustrated because it's hard for me and I don't know how to do it. And then we're like, okay, now we need to help them. So the goal here is looking at the needs and looking at your emotional needs attached to that. And it's like,
Yes.
let's open up that conversation.
Yeah.
So, for me at home, it's where I look at when me and my kids are doing stuff. And it's funny because doing this work is really taking me to a place of I used to come from this space because I think this is what society does is just because I said so. I'm an
Yeah.
adult, do it because I said so. And so your kids, when you're a kid, you just do things and you're sitting there going like, why the heck am I doing this right now?
Yeah, totally.
And you don't understand the why. And then you just start to transfer that into now when you're an adult, you tell that to your kids. And so that's the
Yeah.
cycle, right? So we're trying to break that so we can have more compliance and harmony at home
Mhm.
and start looking at this was the first time I started realizing like I'm asking my kids to do things that I can't do. Like I can't
Totally.
stay calm all the time. Like what is that?
Well,
Like
that we always say that, right? We have these
yeah,
expectations for kids that they have to be these tiny little robots that listen to everything and do everything that we want them to do, and they're quiet and they're cute and they're whatever. It's like, no, why do we have those high why do we expect
right.
that from a literal 3-year-old, you know?
Right. And it's
Yeah,
like they're human and we can't even do that all the time. So that's our first thing is really looking at what are you asking your kids to do? Can you do it? And
exactly.
so many times our parents will come to us and they're like, oh, my kids, they're fighting the brain work. And we just ask a simple question. How do you feel about the brain work?
Yes.
And then they go, well, I internally fight it. Like I know I need to do it, but I don't know why I can't do it. And it's so crazy how much our systems like resist things that are so needed and good for them. This
Mhm.
everyone can relate to that. You're supposed to go, eat healthy, do exercise, but you just don't want to do it. You're like, no. And
Yes.
that there's like internal battle of like, I will not do it. So our kids do the same freaking thing, right? They're like,
Exactly.
no, I don't want to do it, right? Even though they know it's good for them, they don't want to do it. So then we always tell parents, as soon as you come to peace with knowing that you are doing this to help your life get easier,
Yes.
your children will get on board. And I am 100% a testament to that. The minute we both accepted
1000%.
it, yeah, I was
Oh,
like,
100%. It
oh,
just happened with one of the moms in my mom group. She was
right.
like, oh, she was so worried that her kid had a kickstand crawl.
Uh,
And she's she was so worried about it that she started doing the brain work, right? For like a week. By the time I got to her house and saw the kid, he was already crawling regularly. And now he hasn't used his foot again the whole time. It's just
right.
because she focused on herself, right? Like that anxiety wasn't being pulsed into the kid the whole time. Because that's the whole thing with the nervous system co regulation, right? You're picking up the safety signs from the other person. But if you're the young one, you need to pick up the signs from your leader, right? And if
Yes.
you don't know what's going on with your leader, then you have to pick them up on your own. And you're like, wait, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm little, right? Like Siggy, you're supposed
Yeah.
to be taking care of me, right?
Yeah. I'm the kid.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that. So the co-regulation is so huge. And we just have so many parents right now that are saying, I've just been doing my brain work, but my kid hasn't, and they're chilling out. And it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly that. It's the mirroring neurons, it's the co-regulation, it's all of that energy that's being exchanged. And when you, the parent who's supposed to be in charge, calms your energy down, your kid feels it. And
A
that
hundred
goes for
percent.
your thoughts, that goes for everything. So anytime parents come to us with, my kid has blah, 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 the question immediately just goes straight to the parent. Well, what are you feeling about this? And they're like,
Absolutely.
oh my gosh, I don't know why I haven't done any self reflection on this. And it's like, because we were never taught to do self discovery. And
Yes.
our biggest thing.
And that's one of the things also that we want to talk about today, right? Is like when people are fighting things, when kids are fighting things, why are you fighting it? Like, let's sit down and talk. Why don't you want to pick up your room?
Right.
Maybe I can't do it right, right? I don't know where everything goes. I don't want to be alone when I'm doing it. I don't like being alone in my room. It's not fun for me.
It's
It's
too
too much, right?
overwhelming.
I get overwhelmed, right? Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's boring.
Yeah.
That's such a typical kid response, right? It's so boring.
Yeah.
And like giving them, and the article says this too, giving them a reward isn't going to make picking up your room fun. Like it just isn't, right? So, what can we help to make it more enjoyable? What can we do to help make it more enjoyable? If you want to do it with somebody, okay, cool. Let me know next time. I'll have an activity and we can do it together. Well, body doubling, right?
Mm.
Or, hey, remember that really cool book on Audible? Let's play it while you clean up your room. And like I do that every single time I have to clean up my room. I put on a really good podcast and I forget and I end up cleaning even more than I thought I was going to do, right? I'm like taking out old things. Like you get into it, right? Because your brain is able to engage in two things. And it's also kind of helping them understand like, yes, some things in the world are just not going to be like not everything in your life is going to be fun and entertaining and but you can find ways to make every little tiny moment enjoyable, right? In whatever works for you. And giving them that choice of being like, what do you think would make it more fun for you, right? Maybe if you pick up for a little bit and then you play with something, and then you pick up a little bit more and then you play with something, right? Like, let's find what works for them because
Yeah.
once again, these are skills that they're going to use for the rest of their lives.
Right. That brings them onto the independence of like, hey, I learned to do this back when I was a kid. It becomes my habit now. And I just
Yes.
know to put on a podcast and fold my laundry and put it away. I do that too. And we were just talking about this too the other day of when you, and this is always the catch 22 with brain organization is you need to have a developed crawl to be able to clean a room effortlessly, right? But
Yes.
getting them to have that crawl means that you do have to insert some extra dopamine to help them see the benefit of the crawling to then bleed over to how much easier room, keeping your room up is.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of that. And this was totally me before I was doubling down on my crawling, which is developing the midbrain. Remember, that's the part of the brain that develops between 6 to 12 months of life when a baby is crawling. And it's really essentially the filter of the brain, the piece to help you transition from one thing to the next. It's the part that sees the big picture, breaks it all down, and keeps it organized. And honestly, if you go look at your car or your room right now, just go look at the state of it, you'll be able to tell what state your midbrain is in because
Yes.
it is a direct correlation to how your brain is functioning.
Hmm.
So when I started crawling more, I used to do this thing where I would sit in my head. I'm sure you listeners might have this come to them. I would just start adding how much time it was going to take me. And then I would talk myself out of it because I was like, oh, it's just going to take so long to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's procrastination, right? And then you get
Yes.
to the wire where you're literally, you have to. And now your stress hormones are raging through your system and you have to get it done. And you're like, oh, I got it done finally. But it's because you needed that deadline.
Mhm.
As soon as you start crawling, your brain can just like start getting things done easier and just
Mhm.
effortlessly track it. And I would notice myself like, oh, I should go start laundry. Instead of like sitting in my head for a while ruminating on the thought, I would just go do it and I'd come back. I'm like, whoa, only a minute went by? That was it? Like, that was easy. So that's why we're trying to help you understand the motivation to get the brain work done does require some extra dopamine boosts in the beginning to help them feel that they can get over that hump of like, oh my gosh, organizing my room is so overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Then once we're doing it and our brain becomes more organized, now we can just have conversations about it. And now me
Exactly.
and my kids, we just talk about it all the time. They don't need carrots being dangled for them to get their creeping done. We just go, okay, we're doing it. Let's go.
Yep.
And we'll go upstairs and we'll take care of our brains. And then we talk about it a lot. This is another big piece we want to talk about with you is once you start to see the positive rewards of these great new changes in their behavior and their living, you have to highlight it because the brain
Mhm.
needs to have like that cha-ching. Yeah,
Yes.
I see that new neural connection and I want to keep it alive because neurons
Yes.
wire together, wire
Wire
together.
together.
You got to keep that alive. So anytime I see my kids, Axel the other day, he's been we haven't in all honesty, I have been more on me doing my brain work because I like just love how I feel when I do it. And I'm like, if I'm chill, then my kids are chill.
Yeah.
But then I started seeing some midbrain behaviors from my son come out where he was just not remembering what was next. It was like
Yeah.
kind of insane. And he was getting really sensory overloaded by his hair bothering him. He's like, oh gosh,
Oh,
mom, can you cut my hair? It's like tickling my ears and I hate the way it feels. And then when he got down on the floor, sure enough, he crawls with his hands and knuckles and
right. Of
there's your
course.
sensory. Um,
Yes.
so he started doing some more. We did some brain work last week. We brought some in this week. And then all of a sudden I gave him like a 3-step direction and he did all 3 steps without one reminder. I was like, oh, it happened. Okay, there we go.
Yes.
There's that midbrain. So then I go, Axel, did you love that? And he's like, what? I'm like, you just did those 3 things without stopping and needing a reminder. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. Ah, cool. I was like, why do you think that happened? He's like, my brain work. It's like he doesn't always want to admit it, but he knows it's good for him.
Of
Like,
course.
yeah, I did my brain work. So that's the connection loop, right? And like that's where that intrinsic reward will come in. It's like I do this, then this is my reward. And it
Yep.
becomes just a natural way of going about life and not needing
100%.
your mom to nag you. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just becomes natural and easy and part of who you are. And I think another thing that we do often is we naturally call more attention to things that are negative, right? We've talked about this before on the podcast. It's really the way that our brain is wired is to give more energy to negative things. And it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes to focus on the positive. I mean, I know it sounds like, oh yeah, we'll just look at the positive things that they're doing, right? Like why
right,
not?
right.
But we're just trained to avoid, like, to look for the negative but also avoid the negative, if that makes sense. So it's kind of
Mhm.
like at the same time, we want to avoid meltdowns like the plague, right? We don't want them to feel anything negative. We want to protect them and have them be happy all the time, right? That's once again that expectation. That's what kids are. They're
Right.
happy little sweetie little cutie patooties, right? And like they're not allowed to be humans. That's something that Mr. Rogers said often. It's
Yeah.
like just because they're little people doesn't mean that their emotions are also little, right?
Oh, I love
Like,
Mr.
and it's
Rogers.
so
So
true.
good.
Like, it might be something. I mean, I love Mr. Rogers. If you haven't seen that
Ahead of his
documentary, you
time.
have to watch it. It's on
Oh,
HBO. You haven't seen it? Oh my God, dude.
no. Okay,
Okay,
I'll watch it
it's gonna
this
blow your
weekend.
mind. You're gonna cry nonstop, but it's so good. It's
I
so
love
cute.
it. I'm so here for
It's
it.
so sweet. But
He was
he
so
always
ahead of
talked
his
about
time.
that because that was his
Yeah.
whole approach is like validating the emotions that they have, whether they're negative or they're positive, and understanding like, you know, if if dropping your ice cream on the floor is the worst thing ever to you. Like, and you get, and you feel terrible. You're so sad. You were looking forward to it so much. What does an adult do? Oh, it's just ice cream. Come on, let's go. We got to go to the. practice. We got to go home. Come on, it's fine. It's just ice cream. Get over it. But for that kid, they're like, excuse me, I was looking forward to this all day. This is a
Yeah.
big deal for me.
I
It might be
earned
like my
it.
fifth ice cream ever. Like, come on, like this is a big deal for me. And
Yeah.
so we minimize things because we don't want them to feel the discomfort for ourselves, right? So we minimize it in them for us because we
Right.
also don't want to be put in that uncomfortable place. And so
Ex
that's where it's like, it's just so common and people do it all the time. And we don't even notice where a kid is having a situation. You're like, oh, it's fine. Just forget. It's no big deal because you see it from a different perspective. And immediately, what you're telling that child is, okay, what I feel is not valid. And so I need to hide my feelings. And I
Mhm.
need to, and also there's probably something wrong with me because why did I get upset about something? And my parents said it doesn't matter. Like, what's wrong with me? So we're instilling all of these beliefs and we don't even know it. Right. And so that's also the piece where we have to have empathy for ourselves because we are like, grew up in a certain way where we're like, the adult is like, I don't want to feel that emotion. Like it's not cute and it's not fun. And so
Right.
I don't want them to feel it. So it's kind of this thing where you have to like also pat yourself on the back, be like, okay, you've gone through what you've gone through, right? But let's give this child the opportunity to feel their feelings and to truly get in contact with that stuff because that's how you build emotional intelligence as well, right? And emotional resiliency is like being able to feel your feelings and express whatever's going on in your life naturally without feeling like you're going to be judged or like it's not valuable or like it's wrong. And again, this is as I'm saying that, I'm saying I'm not judging the parents that do it. We're not judging the parents or teachers that do this, because it's been instilled in us for so long, right? Get over it. It's not a big deal. Negative feelings. No, no, no. Just push them aside. And we do it with adults too, where somebody be like, oh, I got really upset by this thing that somebody said. Oh, she probably didn't mean it that way.
Right.
No, let's dig into it. Why did you feel upset? Where is it coming from? Because it's usually coming from a wound inside of you, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why you're trying to avoid that feeling in your child, especially when it comes to like talking about sensitive subjects or whatever it is. That's where all of your programming comes out. And I know we always say it's all about looking at ourselves first, but it just truly is. It just
It
is.
is.
Yeah.
And honestly, what you nailed is the whole shame cycle, right? It's
Yeah.
like everything really that we have such a hard time talking about boils down to shame. And it's
Yep.
like, I'm not lovable, I'm unworthy, I'm disconnected from something. And it's these little moments of like an ice cream falling on the floor. And for us, it brought up so much emotion. And then it was like, you're not valid. And then you're like,
Hmm.
now I'm shameful. I'm unworthy of having emotions. Right. And so now we carry that through
Yes.
our whole lives. And it's butting up with our kids and us, and the parents who are getting really honest and raw and having these hard conversations about their own upbringing can now start to change the whole discussion with their own kids. And I sit there openly with my kids and tell them everything. And I've had people come up to me, they're like, I want my kid to come home and tell me everything. It's like, well, do you tell your kid everything? Like, and I'm not saying
Right.
everything,
No,
I'm
of
saying
course not.
the way you feel, right? And so I let my kids know that it's normal to have arguments with people.
Yeah.
It's not normal to hit people. There's a difference. And so I think even when you say an argument, my mind immediately goes into like a fist fight. Like that's how I was programmed to think an argument looks, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
an argument can just be like, I see something different than you, and we're having a discussion about our differences.
Exactly.
And that's okay. But it's not okay to start hitting each other and being mean and aggressive and doing all these other things to each other. And this is where doing this really heavy work to dive deep into what you experienced as a kid alongside as you're raising your kids, it's a
Hmm.
lot. But as you start practicing it more and you start identifying and you start saying, hey, my need is this, it's bringing up a lot of like, because maybe the ice cream on the floor for you as an adult was like, "Oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have patience to deal with this. I don't want to go spend more money about this." Like you have all your logical reasons as to why.
Hmm.
And you can kind of rattle them all out. But then once you're able to finally get out of your own self and look at your kid and be like, oh, that means a lot to you.
Yeah. And also kids don't have that much access to the prefrontal cortex,
Right.
which is the one that
Right.
says, "Oh, it's just an ice cream. I'll go get another one." Right? Or I'll have another one, or I already ate part of it, so I'm fine.
Right.
So that's also why, once again, we lower what we're expecting in terms of their emotional handling of things, right? It might be the first time it's ever happened to them, right? And so even though you can see it as the logical thing, most likely,
Right.
it's still important to validate what it feels like for them.
100%.
Yeah.
So then once you're in that space and like normally the ice cream hits the floor, we're using this example because it's
Yeah.
probably happened in some capacity to you. But the ice cream hits the floor and then like the emotion of the kid comes up, right? And it's just it's quick. It's a fight, flight, freeze. Like Paloma said, they're not operating from that prefrontal cortex. It's a very survival reaction. It's not like a tiger's walking up to them or they're being like threatened for their lives, but for their own existence, it does feel like that way.
Mhm.
So they're in what we call the pawns. They're in their survival brain. And what we recommend doing when you get into that is like getting a really quick redirect on board so you can help have a
Yes.
conversation next. So then you can give choices and talk about how we're going to move through this.
Yes.
And this just happened the other day. Um, at one of my favorite ways. You have to do some really outlandish, very novel idea on how to get your
Yes.
kids' attention. And so there was a kiddo who was hurt, and I walked up. It wasn't my kids involved in it. So for me, there was no emotion connected to it, which is another big thing for parents.
Yeah.
And I just see me, I was like, oh my gosh, is everybody okay here? Okay, wait, I have to just make sure. Did your belly button fall off? And the little girl and all the kids were like, "What? She's jumping on a trampoline. Why would her belly button fall off?" And it's just like this really like that's the only way you can process that is in your cortex. And so it kicks them into their cortex immediately. So it
Mhm.
gets them out of survival mode into their cortex to think about it. And once they're there, you can see it. Like the whole their physiological shift in their
Everything
body
changes, yeah.
happens. The crying stops and like their shoulders drop and you can just see like okay the cortisol starting to drop out of their system and now you come out with like another quick redirect of like okay how are we going to move through this right now? Do
Exactly.
you want to do this or do you want to do this? And if you can, you can't always grab their attention that way because sometimes when I do this with my kids and it's me and I'm the safe zone
Of
and I
course.
try to do something novel, they might escalate it. And so oftentimes quiet is a really good one, just not engaging and you staying super calm and, I just hold space for my kids. It's
Mhm.
another really good way to get them back into their cortex. But the goal is get them in their cortex. It takes time and patience. And so that's a really big piece and something novel if that works. And then you give choices on how do we
Mhm.
handle the next thing. And I love to give my kids a choice when it comes to what do you want? Do you want this or do you want this? Giving a choice and 2 choices that you, the parent, you're comfortable with, and you give them that autonomy to make that choice of, "Okay, I'm moving myself towards independence. I get to choose what thing I do next." So
Yeah, and I think also just really quickly, let's remove the fear of the emotion and remove the fear of the tantrum or the
right,
reaction because also it's very natural. You feel that thing happens, your body goes into that survival mode, and so you're flooded with all this cortisol and adrenaline and chemicals. You need to get it out somehow. And
right.
sometimes screaming and crying is a great way to get it
Yes,
out.
it's a
And a
great
lot of us have seen that when you use the quiet approach. They'll cry
mhm,
for a little bit and then they're over it and they're fine.
yeah,
And they need to get
yeah,
it out. And we've all felt this too when you have a very stressful situation that you're like, "Oh my god, I need to get this out," and it feels so good to cry or to do something, to, like, punch a pillow and punch something, like, get it really out of your system. It feels amazing because that's what it's meant for. It's meant to be used.
right. And again, if you're a parent who you're fearing your child to melt down, that's your stuff, right? That's
Mhm.
where you get to go, why do I have shame? Does it make me feel like I'm a bad parent? Do I
Mhm.
feel like I honestly don't know what to do. A lot of parents
Mhm.
don't know what to do. Paloma and I have been so blessed to have so much training on other people's kids before I had my own. And I really got to learn. I even had to apologize to a couple parents I ran into last week. I was like, I no longer do that approach. I'm so
Oh,
sorry
that's
I did
so
that
good. I
on your
love that.
child. I remember when we do like you have to keep doing your patterns no matter how much you cry. And we totally wouldn't that's how we were trained and we would never do that.
Ever.
It's hard to think
It was
about.
not yeah, it's hard to
So
even
I
remember the feeling.
apologize to all of those parents that have come before. And it's really like parenting is hard for sure, but really the biggest part is looking at you and going, what
Mhm.
is it bringing up for me? To say yes or to say no and to get
Yes.
clarity on what need you're getting met. And then from
Yes.
there, you can use all these amazing tools to like just navigate your relationship with your kids so differently. And
Yeah.
number one thing, I can't believe you haven't said it yet, explicitly at least, is society's expectations on parenting. And it's like,
How did I not say that?
I know. It's because I don't think it's, like, in your wheelhouse with this
Yeah, because I'm
topic,
not a parent.
because you
Yeah.
don't have any expectations, because 'cause you're like, I don't have kids right now."
Yeah.
But for me, like, and this is, I loved when my kids gave me such a moment to go reflect on certain things. And I've talked about it a million times, like Axel playing baseball and how he was so fearful. And I'm like, what do you mean you're so fearful? But then I would honestly start catching myself being fearful in little moments of like the ball coming
Mm,
at me when I was playing catch with him. And I was like, oh, okay, there's some
interesting.
compassion. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna be picking this up from me. So,
Yeah,
this is parenting, is like you get to use your kids to spotlight and highlight all the things that you get to go work on. And
totally.
it's a fun, when you get into that space and you really like can step out of the emotional triggers and the activations constantly, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, my kids are teaching me this right now. Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
cool." And then
Yep.
you start to just, your relationship with your kids grows and shifts and changes. I feel like I'm in such a sweet spot with my 5 and 8-year-old right
Mm-hmm.
now where I'm like, "Dude, we can go places with just like one little backpack, like not even a full backpack. Like we can just like go charge the world now." And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're doing great. And we've done
Yeah.
so much hard work for the past 8 years to get here. So if you're like, I want that, I want to experience this with parenting, join us in the Parenting Revolution course. I mean, you would be joining a little bit late, but you know what? You get the program for life. You get
Yeah.
access to me, Paloma, and Greer, and we're having some amazing conversations. Our next one is
Oh,
Monday when this hits.
yes.
But they're all recorded and you can go back and watch them. Or you can
Yeah.
join our ITC regular program, which is equally amazing and full of
Yes.
so much stuff. So there's a lot there. Do you want to take us out?
I will take us out. Okay. Please like our podcast and subscribe and rate it because when you rate it, like the algorithm will push it more to more people, and that's what we want is to spread the word that the brain can change and there's hope and life can get easier for all of us. Please follow us on Instagram at in the cortex_US. If you are a Spanish speaker, you can do in the cortex underscore ESP. And on TikTok, we are at in underscore the underscore cortex. And our website is inthecortex.com. You can also always send us an email at hello at inthecortex.com. We answer all of our emails personally, the two of us. You can also set up a 15-minute call if you have something specific that you would like to work through or kind of like talk about and see what our perspective would be and how the program can help you. And if you use promo code Brainiac, you can get $10 off the first payment of your program. And we are excited to see you in our next Cortex chat. Remember to keep sending us your recommendations and your ideas through DMs. And thank you.
Thank you.